Have you ever looked out a train window and noticed that the railway tracks are always surrounded by thousands of stones? They're everywhere, under every rail, between every sleeper, stretching for miles. Most people never think about them. They just assume they're there because that's how railways are built. But what if those stones disappeared overnight? Would the train still run? Surprisingly, not for very long. Without those ordinary-looking rocks, some of the world's heaviest machines could slowly destroy the tracks beneath them. The rails would begin to shift. Water would collect where it shouldn't. The ground would weaken. And eventually, a train traveling at over 300 kilometers per hour could be at serious risk. Yet those stones aren't glued together. They aren't cemented in place. They're simply loose rocks. So how can something so simple hold up trains weighing thousands of tons? The answer begins long before modern railways. Back when trains themselves didn't even exist. Long before steel tracks crossed entire continents. People were already struggling with the same problem. How do you move something incredibly heavy across soft ground without sinking into it? For centuries, carts carrying heavy loads often became trapped in mud. Roads turned into deep ruts after rain. Moving goods over long distances was slow, expensive, and unreliable. Engineers needed a better solution. Then, in the early 1800s, railways began changing transportation forever. Instead of spreading weight across dirt roads, heavy trains concentrated enormous forces onto two narrow steel rails. It was an engineering breakthrough, but it created a new problem. Those rails needed an incredibly stable foundation. Without one, even perfectly built tracks would slowly move out of position, and that tiny movement could become a disaster. Someone had to find a way to keep thousands of tons of moving steel perfectly aligned, day after day, year after year. The solution turned out to be something almost nobody notices. Not concrete, not steel, just stones. Before engineers understood exactly how to support railway tracks, they tried simpler solutions. Some early railways were built directly on soil. Others used sand, gravel, or even wooden foundations. At first, everything seemed fine, but after thousands of tons of trains rolled over the same tracks every day, the problems began. The ground slowly compressed. Rain softened the soil. The rails started sinking unevenly. Sometimes, one section of track would sit just a few millimeters lower than another. That may not sound like much, but for a train traveling at high speed, even tiny changes can create enormous forces. The ride became rough. The rails wore out faster. Maintenance crews constantly had to lift the tracks, realign them, and repair the foundation underneath. Engineers realized the rails themselves weren't the problem. The real weakness was the ground beneath them. So they began searching for a material that could solve several problems at once. It had to be strong enough to support enormous weight. It had to allow rainwater to drain away quickly. It had to keep the wooden sleepers firmly in place. And it had to absorb the constant vibration created by passing trains. Surprisingly, the perfect material wasn't an advanced invention. It was crushed stone, not smooth river stones, not ordinary gravel. Sharp-edged crushed rock, known in the railway industry as ballast. Those sharp edges are incredibly important. When thousands of pieces of crushed stone are packed together, their rough surfaces lock against each other, almost like the pieces of a giant puzzle. That creates a foundation that's both strong and flexible, strong enough to support trains weighing thousands of tons, flexible enough to absorb vibration without cracking. But that's only one of its jobs. Because the greatest enemy of every railway isn't the train, it's water. Water might seem harmless, but to a railway, it's one of the biggest threats. Imagine what happens after heavy rain. If the ground beneath the tracks can't drain properly, water begins to collect, the soil turns soft, the foundation weakens, and every passing train pushes the rails deeper into the ground. Over time, the tracks slowly become uneven. That's where the ballast proves its real value. The gaps between the crushed stones allow rainwater to flow straight through. Instead of collecting beneath the tracks, the water drains into the soil below, keeping the railway dry, stable, and strong. Without those gaps, every storm would slowly damage the foundation. But drainage is only part of the story. Every time a train passes, it creates enormous vibrations. A single freight train can weigh more than 10,000 tons as its wheels roll along the rails. That weight creates powerful forces traveling into the sleepers and then into the ground below. If those forces weren't absorbed, the rails would loosen, the sleepers would shift, and tiny movements would slowly become dangerous ones. The ballast acts like a giant shock absorber. Each crushed stone moves just enough to spread the force across thousands of surrounding stones. Instead of one point taking all the pressure, the entire foundation shares the load. That helps protect both the tracks and the ground underneath. There's another hidden job the stones perform. Plants. Given enough time, nature tries to reclaim almost everything. Grass, weeds, small bushes, even tree roots. If vegetation grew freely beneath railway tracks, roots could lift the sleepers, trap moisture, and weaken the entire foundation. The thick layer of crushed stone makes it extremely difficult for most plants to grow. It's a simple solution, but an incredibly effective one. So those ordinary-looking rocks aren't just holding up the tracks. They're draining water, absorbing vibrations, spreading enormous loads, and helping keep nature from slowly taking the railway apart. But despite all of that, railway ballast doesn't last forever. Eventually, even stone begins to wear out. Over the years, the constant weight of passing trains slowly grinds the ballast down. Each stone rubs against the ones beside it. Sharp edges become rounded. Large rocks break into smaller pieces. Eventually, the stones can no longer lock together the way they once did. And when that happens, the entire foundation begins losing its strength. The smaller fragments also create another problem. They fill the empty spaces between the stones. At first, that might sound like a good thing, but it isn't. Those empty spaces are what allow rainwater to drain away. As they disappear, water starts getting trapped beneath the tracks. The ballast becomes less effective. The foundation weakens. And maintenance crews know it's time to act. You might think they simply pour new stones on top, but railway maintenance is far more precise than that. Specialized machines travel along the tracks. Some lift the rails and sleepers without removing them. Others dig out the old ballast beneath. Powerful screens separate reusable stones from broken ones. Fresh ballast is added where needed. Then another machine tamps the new stones tightly beneath each sleeper. This process restores the track to almost the exact position it was designed to have, sometimes to within just a few millimeters. Because on a modern railway, even tiny errors matter. A high-speed train traveling at 300 kilometers per hour doesn't forgive mistakes. The rails must remain perfectly aligned, not just for comfort, but for safety. That's why railway engineers constantly inspect the tracks. Today, many railways use laser measuring systems, sensors, and specialized inspection trains that can detect tiny movements long before they become dangerous. From the outside, it still looks like nothing more than a pile of ordinary rocks. But beneath every passing train, those stones are performing one of the most important engineering jobs on the entire railway. And without them, modern rail transport simply wouldn't be possible. Think about it. The next time you stand on a railway platform or watch a train race past, take another look at the ground beneath the tracks. Those stones aren't there to fill empty space. They're carefully chosen, precisely shaped, and engineered to perform several critical jobs at the same time. They spread the weight of trains weighing thousands of tons. They drain away rainwater before it can weaken the ground. They absorb constant vibrations. They hold the sleepers firmly in place. They slow the growth of plants that could damage the tracks. And when they eventually wear out, they're replaced so the railway can continue operating safely. It's an elegant solution. No electronics, no motors, no complicated machinery. Just millions of carefully crushed stones, quietly doing a job that most people never notice. For nearly 2 centuries, they've helped keep trains moving across cities, mountains, deserts, and entire continents. Every day, Billions of passengers travel over them without giving them a second thought. Yet remove those ordinary-looking rocks, and modern railways will begin to fail from the ground up. Sometimes, the most important parts of an engineering masterpiece are the ones hiding in plain sight. One layer of stone, supporting one of humanity's greatest transportation systems, one of the countless things nobody sees. If you enjoyed uncovering this hidden story, subscribe to What Nobody Sees for more documentaries about the hidden systems, forgotten designs, and everyday mysteries quietly shaping our world. And tell me in the comments, what everyday mystery should we uncover next?